on the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. I'm Carrie Sharp. I'm so glad to be with you tonight. Great topic to chime in on tonight. We're talking about minimum wage in Tennessee. And of course, this is OpenLine. It's your chance to call and ask our expert questions and also let us know your story tonight. So the numbers at the bottom of the screen, 615-737+. If you have questions about efforts across Tennessee to raise minimum wage, we're going to get those answered tonight. We'd also love to know your experience living on minimum wage. And I've got a great expert tonight, as I mentioned, Andy Spears from Tennessee Citizen Action. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, glad to do it.
So first of all, tell us about Tennessee Citizen Action. What is it? What do you do?
Yeah, so we've been around, this is our 21st year in Tennessee. We were started in 1998, and we work on consumer protection issues, on economic justice issues, so how people get paid, what they get paid, making sure workers get paid. And we're involved with the legislature, so we're actively involved, raising issues and awareness and doing some lobbying about the minimum wage, for example, Medicaid expansion, payday lending, and just basic consumer protections. And we've done that for a long time.
Consumer advocacy really across the board.
Absolutely,
we see you pop up in several stories and in our newsroom from time to time. Tonight we're talking about minimum wage, as I let you know. Again, the number at the bottom of the screen if you want to call in. We'd love to hear from you tonight. First of all, give me the big picture of minimum wage, efforts to raise it across the country, what different states are doing. Yeah,
so in the 2018 elections, we saw 4 different states raise the minimum wage, some up to $15 an hour, some a little bit less. The current federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour and has not been raised since 2006. Tennessee is actually one of only 7 states that doesn't have an official state minimum wage. So that means we just default to the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. And it's been that way for a long time. I remember working at Kroger in Louisville, Kentucky, and I made about $8 an hour back in like 1999, and that's more than the minimum wage that people in Tennessee make today.
I had the same thought when you said $7.25. I was thinking, in high school, what did I make? And it was right around there.
Yeah, I started making $6 an hour, and then I worked there long enough to end up making like close to $8 an hour, and that's more than what people make now.
And let's face it, $7.25, you cannot live on that, especially in Nashville, but in a lot of areas of the mid-state, it's only about $14,000 a year, right? Or 14 or 15,000 if you are working full time.
Right. If you're working 40 hours a week, it's right about $15,000 a year. So if you worked at $15 an hour, you make about $30,000 a year, which would still be tough in Nashville.
Oh, without a doubt.
But at $7.25, you have to work 2 minimum wage jobs to even be close to being able to live in Nashville.
So you mentioned Tennessee officially does not have its own minimum wage. We default to the federal level. What else is the story across Tennessee when it comes to trying to raise that?
Right. So a few years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, the city of Memphis actually created a citywide minimum wage of $10 an hour. They called it a living wage, and that was kind of their effort to say it's more expensive to live in Memphis than it is in other places in the state. So that was the law in Memphis for about 6 months. Then the legislature came in and said individual cities can't have their own minimum wage, and so they just said you can't do that. And Memphis went back to $7.25 an hour. And so, there's some impetus here in Nashville to do the same thing. They watched what happened in Memphis and said, we don't want to do that because the legislature is just going to come in and override it. And so, maybe it's fair to say in some parts of Tennessee, $7.25 is okay. I still think it's probably should be raised. But in Nashville and Memphis, you can't live on that. You just can't.
No, and we're going to talk about the implications of trying to live on that, the pros and cons of raising minimum wage when it comes to the private sector. But first I want to jump to lines because this is Open Line. So Michael, you're getting us started today. What's your question or comment?
Hey, how you doing, Carrie?
Good, how are you?
Glad you made it through your flight with the Blue Angels.
Oh, thank you. It was awesome.
Seemed like it was. Hello to your guests. I can't understand why mostly Republicans want to always say they want their own right to govern themselves, but then they don't want to let the counties govern themselves on setting their own mandate. One of the things about unequal living wage is that it's a bedrock and a fostering system for these predatory lenders like Cash Advance America, on and on. And basically, it's because people are not having to live in decent wage that they have to go to these predatory lenders like Cash Advance America that's conveniently based out of Tennessee, recently found out. And so it leads on and on to a cycle of never getting out of this continual debt. Because once you go to these payday lenders, it's an on and on continual process. It's like getting out of quicksand.
Yeah.
And it's usually not successful. You're just stuck in there. So something has to be done, because basically we're funneling a system of where people have no other options but to go to these predatory lenders. And I think it's a shame. I also think it's a shame that we have a Speaker of the House is able to retire with his pension for being a racist and a sexist as well. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. We may get to that topic here in just a little bit, because I know you have spoken out on it.
Sure.
But there is a trickle-down effect when it comes to having such a low minimum wage.
Right. So, like Michael said, we see people all the time who go to these payday lending stores because they can't, an emergency happens, their car tire breaks, or something happens at their house, or something happens with their kid, and they go to a payday lender and get $400 or $500, and they fall behind. They have a medical expense. There is almost no way, even at 2 minimum wage jobs, that you can make it in Nashville, and so and in a lot of places around the state. And so then people end up in these kind of economic traps. So he's exactly right. This is, the number one way to keep people away. We work with people who get stuck in these payday loans. The number one way to stop that is to raise the wage so that people can pay for the expenses they have and they can save. If you're making $7.25 an hour, you're not going to be able to save any money.
No.
And you really can't live very many places in Nashville.
And also, it creates a reliance on government assistance.
Right, absolutely. And that's one of the things, I was pleased to see the CEO of Walmart say, the federal government should raise the minimum wage. I would say back to him, you can do it yourself. Don't wait for the federal government. Start paying all your employees a $15 minimum wage. Start offering them health care. That's the other thing. Walmart is one of the biggest welfare recipients in the country in terms of people who work at Walmart also get TennCare in Tennessee, so it's Medicaid, because they don't offer the type of healthcare benefits that would cover their employees, and then they pay low wages. I think they pay $10 or $11 an hour now, and that's still not enough.
Let's go back to the phones. They are lighting up. Let me try to get you to, I think we lost Angie, so we're going to go to Wayne. Wayne, are you with me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate the time.
Sure.
It's an interesting question that you are asking on this show. I just have 2 things that I need a little information on.
Okay.
I always thought that the minimum wage was an entry-level position, so you can get the training and education without going to a training program, and that's the whole purpose. In other words, you go in there completely untrained and unskilled, and they teach you a skill so you can take the next step and get more money. So I say minimum wage, it could be increased a little, but I'm saying it's an entry-level position, and people shouldn't forget about that.
Okay. What's the second
The
issue?
next question is, why are things suddenly getting so expensive that it's getting to a point to where they have to be put on a monthly payment, and a lot of these people that are living on credit, they'll never pay it off.
Yeah.
So my question is, why are things suddenly getting more and more expensive? And it seems like as you go down, they should be less expensive because you're learning how to make them cheaper. So why are everything getting so expensive nowadays?
That's a good question. Wayne, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Let's start with the entry level, because a lot of folks will say, hey, these fast food worker jobs are not meant to be lifelong career building jobs.
Yeah, well, so I would say 2 things. One, Tennessee leads the nation in percentage of people who work at the minimum wage. So we have a lot of people who are working at the minimum wage, more than any other state in the country. So whether it's an entry-level wage or what, we've got a lot of people at that point. Even if the minimum wage were $15 an hour, that's $31,000 a year. That's still tough to live on. So that's to me, that's a good entry-level wage. You can make $30,000, learn a trade, learn a skill, and then move on and move up to a better paying job, or maybe become a shift manager or whatever the next step is in your career. But I think it's unfortunate that we live in a state where we have more people working at the minimum wage, and we haven't done anything to improve what that is. So we can have a fair conversation about if 7.25 to 15, that's a big gap. How do we phase that in to make it easier on businesses and consumers? But I think it's pretty clear that $7.25 for a large number of Tennesseans just not going to cut it.
why do we have so many Tennesseans living at that wage? What else is going into that equation that's causing that?
So we are well below the national average in number of people with college degrees, for example. So the national average is about 33%. We're at about 25%. And we do a really good job of offering tax incentives to big companies like Amazon to bring people into not skilled jobs. You can drive your car and deliver packages, but that's not a skilled job. And they can pay you $10 or $11 an hour to do that because you don't have a skill. So, and we're giving away tax dollars to attract those big companies. And so doing better on the education end, and to his credit, Governor Haslam did some work on free community college before he left, and that's a great thing. I think that's going to change the game. But continuing to focus on education is going to make a difference there. And then not giving away huge tax incentives to companies to pay low-wage workers. Right.
Let's jump to one more phone call before we have to take a break. Gary is on the line. Hi, Gary.
How you doing, ma'am?
I'm good. How are you?
Nashville born and raised. How you doing?
Well, you're a unicorn, as we like to call you. What's your comment or question tonight?
This concerns the poor that needs the help. You can get a college degree and walk out and still not be able to have a decent job. Can't pay even your college bill. You can go try to get food stamps, and if you get $1,000, they won't give you nothing but $10 or $15 a month on food stamps. If you got $1,000 in the bank, they probably won't help you with electric either. These are good programs for the poor, but they need to have something in society that supports the poor if they're not going to raise the minimum wage to a working standard. Because if you don't have a minimum wage, the poor that get out of colleges that can't get in their field, or the poor that's still trying to get in somewhere, they don't have a $200 say a month minimum for food stamps. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
they don't
absolutely.
help you with that electric bill. So how do you get anywhere? You don't have a minimum wage.
Yeah, Carrie, thank you for your call. I think that is something that affects what we call the working poor, people who are putting in the 40+ hours in good blue collar jobs and still can't afford to make it.
Right. Well, and that's why I think even if you look at $15 an hour, that's probably enough to make it okay in Nashville, but if you're making less than that, it's going to be really hard to make it work. And so to his point, you graduate from college, and then the other problem is a lot of the social programs have income limits, so you start making a little bit of money, and then that you can't get Medicaid. And so we talk about Medicaid expansion is another issue we've talked about. There are a lot of things that can be done to help address this issue, but to his point, it's either you have to have taxpayers handing out money, or business owners paying people a fair wage for a day's work, and that's where I think we ought to be.
When we come back, I want to talk about local businesses, Tennessee businesses who are really making an effort to change this story. And of course, we'll be taking more of your phone calls too, so go ahead and call us during the break. We'll get those calls lined up. Already had some great ones today, and we always appreciate that. 615-737+ is the number to call. We're coming right back.